Welcome to the meeting of the Stoughton Public Safety Facilities Planning and Construction Committee. This meeting will be video and audio recorded by SMAC to be played at a later date. Why don't we get started? We do have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is public participation. This is for members of the public to make statements concerning what they would like to say in front of us. We will limit each person who wants to speak to 5 minutes, and we may not be able to answer anything at this, but we will use the information we receive for future agenda items. Is there anybody here that would like to speak? Dick Fitz? Dick, could you please identify yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dick Fitzgerald. I am chairman of Precinct 3, town meeting member, lifelong resident of the town of Stoughton. I am appearing before you.
Can you use the other mic? That one doesn't seem to be working for some reason.
Oh, hold on a second. Whoever comes up to this side of the table. Take this one. How's that?
Oh,
Okay.
beautiful. Oh.
That, you didn't take that off my 5 minutes, did you? No. Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. A lot of discussion has gone on in reference to, and I'll stand corrected by the architects and the OPM, of Site C, as I know it, which is Park Street and Fano Drive. I was at the last meeting, the presentation. I was at the school committee meeting with the presentation that was made. And that is, according to the chiefs and to this committee, appears to be the location that the town is looking for to construct a public safety building. Getting into a little bit of the detail with it, there's discussion as to the use of the land and the property or whatever. I insure a piece of property on Park Street. I was going by it the other day, and I decided to place a call to the owner. The property abuts this property, and I asked the owner, had you ever given any thought to selling your property? And his response was, this could be your lucky day. Having it surveyed and appraised, and I am going to sell. This property abuts directly to the property which would have been the Marinelli property, which is where the architect and OPM have laid out the building. It comes with all the utilities, sewage, electric, gas, water, so there's no bringing it up the railroad tracks to have to go into that part of the property. He is open to discussion with this. His comment to me was, Fitzy, I want to help the town out in any way I can for the public safety and for obviously the both chiefs, Chief McNamara and Chief Laracy. He wants to make sure that their building would be a top-notch building. And truth be told, this is prime location. You don't have to go and get into a situation any further, I don't believe, with the school district. That land eventually needs to be used for the school district. That's aside from this conversation. I'm bringing this forward, as I told him I would. My discussion with him started probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, up to just about 6 o'clock tonight. He has requested that when I came to you, that he's more than willing to sit down, and lay the plans out and see what you could do. But I'm presenting it as, if the experts are telling us this is the location, the chiefs are in agreement with that, I'm coming to you from a school side saying we need the property for the schools. There had to be maybe a situation that we could work something out. And I don't know, but if you've got these people over here who are the experts telling us this is the best response location, and I always had it, and I'll be honest with everybody here, when I was on the Board of Selectmen and through town meeting, because it's, it's in my precinct, I wasn't in favor of this location. But you've got to open it up, and you've got to take a look at it and say, okay, people who know better than me are telling me this is the best location. Having said that, I have to support the schools and the use of that property. That's vital. We all know that there's a question about a deed, a warrant from town meeting, and so forth. That's all true. It's there. And this has come before the town before, several times, and it hasn't gone anywhere. I can work with that.
Dick, you're kind of run out of time a little bit, but could you do me a favor, Doran Whittier? Could you guys put up the plan on, because, yeah, right there, right there. Could you point out the property you're talking about, Dick?
Sure. What do you want me to do?
Just go over there and point at it. Only because I'm not sure where it is.
I have one of these little things here with a light on it. Right here. You see this right here?
Yes.
Here, you come down here, this is all down here. This is the property. It's 3.8 acres and a little more.
3.8 acres?
3.8 acres, comes in here, there's a little sliver, I think it goes behind there.
Okay.
It's like, it's 4 acres, huh? Yeah, there's two parcels. One's narrower, and then this is the big one. This goes right out onto 27 Park Street. Plenty of frontage. Again, all the utilities are in. You say what the cost of that. I the engineers can tell you what the cost might be for that. I don't know. But to me, as a neighbor, as living here all my life, I mean, I'm getting up there in age. Who doesn't want to have the bus close to home? I live up here on Franklin Street, so I can't drive that way.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fitzgerald. I would like to ask that our owner's project...
You can get the parcel from that?
Yeah, well, I'm sure Mark can do it. I asked that Doran Whittier and Pomeroy Associates take a look at this parcel, include it as part of your evaluations of the site, and see how it would work with the programs that we're looking for. Okay?
You please let me know so I can get back to the family.
I understand. And they have you still have working group meetings on a regular basis? Yes, okay. So we'll know before the next meeting. Yes, sir. Okay.
In addition to looking at the parcel, can you also look up the rules and ramifications related to acquisition and disposition of real property under Chapter 30B for a municipality, and how that would come into play with engaging in acquisition of property from a private owner? Thank you.
Okay, great. Anybody else from the public? Yes.
I am. 25 years. David Lurie, 18 Robinette Road. Thank you for giving me a moment. I'm not anywhere close to being a site acquisition specialist of any kind. What my concern is that our town in the past has made mistakes by thinking too small. And what concerns me is about whether or not the pendulum swings too far to become thinking too big for a town the size of Stoughton, and trying to find a way to make sure that the cost of a project is within the means of what the town could afford. So you gave me a good idea when I was watching the school committee meeting just the other day. The concept of a modular design in which you can think about incrementally phasing in the combined building. I started to think, well, how could that manifest itself in a way that favors the town in way of its budget, so we don't have to do a town-wide vote to get the taxes raised to make it work? So if you were able to build, regardless of where it is, a fire station that accommodated the police department for either a records area, a evidence room, maybe even a few spaces where the officers would be able to occupy space because of chain of custody and whatever other reason, that you could potentially make it the future home of a complete police station there, or it becomes swing space for a different spot if it makes more sense, let's say in 5 years, when the town builds up enough capacity to build another project, like a police station. So it's either swing space or a modular build to continue building a police in the same building as a public safety. That introduces a way in which we could potentially do it. We're doing a lot of work in the Finance Committee to try to find capital project funding and ways to do it within the budget. So I just want to let you know that as a citizen here in Stoughton, my interest is in trying to make it so that the phase-in of a very good project, not to think small, but not to oversize the project outside the reach of the average citizen in Stoughton. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else from the public? No one else? We'll continue on. The next item is the approval of minutes, and the minutes for January 16th, 2020. I reviewed them, and I think I had some small changes. I think we're all set. Has everybody reviewed them? Does anybody have any questions, comments, or otherwise? Can I hear a motion? Thank you. A second? Thank you. I have a motion and a second to accept the minutes of January 16th, 2020. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Are there any abstentions?
Aye.
Aye.
2 abstentions. Did you get that, Taylor? The 2 Joes. Okay, the next item is invoice approval, and we only have 1 invoice this time, and that is for Pomeroy Associates. They have a set amount that they invoice every month, and that amount is $6,500, and this is for the month of January, and the invoice is for $6,500, so I would entertain a motion to recommend.
Make a motion to recommend approval of the invoice number SPS-004 for the amount of $6,500.
Do I hear a second? Any other comments or questions? In that case, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we have the cover sheet, which I'm going to sign and start to send around. There you go. Thank you, Christine. Okay, the next item is the school committee meeting presentation. The school committee meeting on February 11th. Both the architect and the owner's project manager attended, as well as myself. Chief Larissy was there, and Fran was there also. So do you guys want to run through that and show what you showed the school committee? And then we'll talk a little bit about it.
We absolutely can, and I know further down your agenda you have program discussion.
Right.
We've kind of cooked that into this, so do you want us to skip over that now and go back to it after?
Why don't we go back to that afterwards? I want to just talk about what happened at that.
Yep, can absolutely do that. So, thank you. So what we presented the other evening was it was a presentation not too dissimilar from what we have presented to this committee back on the 19th, I believe, of December. But essentially, we took that group through our process, letting them know that we had a very exhaustive and inclusive process to determine the space needs for both a police station, a fire station, or a public safety facility. We then looked at a number of potential sites, both publicly owned and privately owned. There were 13 in total. At the same time, we did a response time analysis, both for police and fire, but really has more of an impact on fire because they start from primarily a static position, leaving a station all the time, as opposed to being a police cruiser who might be on patrol throughout the community. So Alan will talk about that a little bit. And as you can see, we determined the parking needs for either police, fire, or public safety, and that's for professional vehicles, personal vehicles, visitors, and if there are people coming for training to the facility or facilities. And we then developed some relationship diagrams talking about how spaces need to work with each other, starting from the main entrance with public lobby, meeting room, dispatch, records, and then, kind of separating into the police and fire parts of the building. Did some site test fits on what were determined to be the most viable sites in the community, basically established the building footprint and showed how it may lay out, and then we developed order of magnitude costs, which you're familiar with. So we'll jump over the diagrams, and I'm going to continue going. Okay. So I'll just continue along. So the sites that rose to the top, as you see up in the diagram, what we called Site A and Site B, which are right down the street from each other. We have Pleasant Street and Glen Echo, right on that corner, and then Site B, which is 951 Pleasant Street, which is the Armory site. These sites were viable. There was potential for either fire, police, or combined public safety going at the Pleasant and Glen Echo site, but when you got to Site B, the Armory, only an individual fire or individual police facility could go there. The combined public safety just would not work with its necessary parking. So Site C, which is what we call Park and Fano Drive, total to 28-acre parcel. We looked at the fire only, the police only, and the combined public safety. And really, this site rose to the top for many reasons, but probably the most important reason had to do with public safety. And this site had the best response time as it related to getting to an incident in 2 minutes or less as it compared to sites A and B. Site D, 1232 Washington, was police only because it did not work for fire, especially as it related to response time. Site E, existing police station site, that could only work for police because the way the streets are configured, fire apparatus could not get out and get around the corners in those intersections in a safe manner. So that would only be used for police. Site N, which is the existing Freeman site, as it exists alone, it's just too small. The number of parcels that you need to acquire to make it work was untenable. I will point out also, and you'll see it in the response time diagrams, that actually has the best response time for fire. But since it doesn't work without buying a number of parcels, is another reason why Site C rose to the top. And then Site X is the existing fire department headquarters, which is there for information only.
If I could add to that also, we also tested for optimal sites for police and fire, and the optimal site for fire came in pretty close to where location C is.
Good point.
So it was a good check on that location.
That's right.
So I know that we went over this a little bit at the last meeting, the response time, but just, there was a lot of questions on who the person that was doing all this and his experience. He was actually at the meeting on Tuesday night, and I'll try to be a little more brief than what he was because he loves to get into the details. But anyway, as you can see, we hired Travis Miller from Criterion Associates. We've been doing many projects with him. You can see his list of projects are nationwide, but those that are highlighted, the ones we've done recently with him. But he's got 25 years of public service consulting, mostly for analytical, especially for response time. So he is an expert in this field. But basically, he does hundreds of fire rescue, law enforcement, and other miscellaneous reports. And let's move on to the next one. So just to kind of go over what he does is that we took the data that came from the town for the last 3 to 5 years and records the actual calls from the fire and police station. But basically, we looked at a combination of a public safety, but also standalone fire and police stations. We did a lot of analysis for that. Just to start off, we studied 11 different scenarios, including 2 optimized sites that Jason mentioned. And we analyzed the time for under 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, and 8 minutes. And again, 4 minutes and 8 minutes are kind of the national standards, but we did want to look at all those other, the other 2 items. So just so everyone understands, response time measures the time the apparatus or the cruiser gets the call and they leave the station, okay? So then it's the time it gets there, okay? So it's not the time it takes the guys to put on their stuff to get into the trucks. It's when they actually leave the station and get to the scene. Same thing with police, when they get the call from their cruiser and report to the scene. That's what this time is all about, okay? Just to be very, very clear. Each call is measured a certain percentage, each scenario, is a percentage of calls that come under that time frame, okay? We'll see that in a moment. And then basically we created some tables, which we're not gonna share with you tonight, but we do have the heat maps that you've all seen before, so why don't we go to the next one? So as you can see, here's the existing system. So this is where we started from. So this is the existing fire headquarters and station number 1. And just make a note about the under 2 minutes, 45%, as an example, 45% of the calls made it in under 2 minutes. Easy way of looking at it. To the other extreme, everything, 90% of all the calls made it under 8 minutes. So that was the first one we looked at. Then we looked at Site A and Site B. And you can see that the response time with under 2 minutes went up a little bit at 27.3%, and about the same for under 8 minutes. But the key is the 2 minutes is really what we've been looking at here.
Yeah, just to clarify there, right, there's a 15% drop in calls responded to in under 2 minutes by moving to sites A or B over the existing.
Oh, I thought that was for the Park and Fano coming up.
And then Park and Fano.
That's the 15, yeah, that's the 15% improvement. So that's why Park and Fano kind of rose to the top there. And as you can see, it's on the southern hemisphere of the town. So just logically, it also makes sense because that's also closer to the residential area. But we're just mostly been dealing with raw data. And as you can see, the response time for under 2 minutes is much better than the other scenarios. The 8 minutes are about the same. So, and you can see that's everything in orange there, in red, sorry.
Yeah, one thing Travis noted was that the response time study, the computer doesn't care where everything is, but the way this particular diagram works, by getting better coverage in the southern part of town, it's a higher residential area than if you go back one slide. In the northeast corner, that's Route 24 and a lot of commercial property. So from public safety and response time, go back, that Site C is just better for the town.
Correct.
So focusing in on Site C, on Fennel Drive, this is, if you see the arrow in the upper right-hand corner, this is the access point from Park. The green line running through is Fano. You can see it's not a well-developed road right now, so that would need to be part of the project, that you essentially need to make a public way between this site. And in the upper portion are the 28 acres that we're talking about. With the school committee, we are also showing the existing South School location for comparative purposes. And then down off of Sumner Street, again, almost similar, same view as you got from Park Street. You see Fano Drive, really an extra wide driveway right now. And then seeing the two sites together with the South Elementary School below, that pink line running through the lower portion of Fano Street site and the school site currently, there were some power lines there. There was questions about the voltage. It's not high-tension wire. It is a standard voltage wire, similar to what you might have running down the side of a street. So the way that we've looked at the site, for our development, the blue line running through the middle is a current water easement. We've looked at developing the portion to the northeast of that, so the 8.52 plus 3.05 acres, so essentially 11 and a half acres there, which leaves 16 and a half acres on the lower portion of the site not used by public safety. And just wanted to make you aware that there are some environmental features out there in the upper portion of the public safety site. There's a wetland in the middle. You can see the buffer highlighted around that. Then down below, we have wetland and buffer and some floodplain in there also. So in terms of the development of the site, on the upper side, we have the public safety building with fire located to the southern portion. You can see the apparatus bays there that Jason is running the cursor over. There's 5 apparatus bays, 3 which are drive-through, and a maintenance bay. The entrance to the building is in the center. There's a dark arrow right there. And then essentially you go in, fire to the left, police to the right, with the sally port located in the upper right-hand corner there. Public parking in front of the building, and then secure police and fire parking behind the building. And
Don, I'm going to
Yes,
kind of
sir.
stop you there for, just to...
Sure.
Most of us have seen this before, and this is the point at which time the school committee basically asked us to stop anyway, as I recall. Okay, so I was at that presentation, and I came away with a few things. The school committee asked some very good questions, and they had some very good concerns. One of the more interesting ones is the question of, in looking at this this drawing, would it be a problem if the fire station was next to an elementary school? And Taylor, I think you had some experience down in Chatham that you could tell us about?
We did. We just built the Chatham Fire Station. Is that close enough? We just built the Chatham Fire Station, which was on the same campus, actually, as the Chatham Elementary School, about 100, probably about 50 yards away was the actual school, surrounded by the Chatham A's ball fields. There was a museum there, and the Chatham Bike Trail. So it was a very highly populated area that we built the fire station in and around a school campus without any issues, and still they haven't had any issues there today.
Okay, and Chief Laracy, as I recall, did you address the traffic on, or did you-
They asked about the noise, the sirens. Coming from the fire department. So if you look at the fire department where the bays are, you'd be exiting onto Fano Drive, and really there's no need for any sirens going out to that road. Not until you get to the Park Street where there'll be a light, and with the light, most likely there wouldn't even be a need for sirens because you have the light, going in your way. So I don't think that, to me, I don't think that would be an issue
okay.
for the noise part of it.
Well, I'm glad you addressed it. In the long run, the school committee listened to everything, and they did come up with a very interesting suggestion that I kind of want to pop around here, and that is that we address the legal issues concerning the site first before we get too far along. So I was wondering, Robin, if that's something that we could start on right away with town council? They asked if town council could also include the school committee council in terms of evaluating the legal implications of getting the site turned over from educational use to general municipal use.
Yeah, we can talk to town council. We've had some preliminary discussions, but I can get something formal, yes.
Okay, all right. I was kind of hoping we would get some indicator of, from the school committee, but I don't believe they were prepared to do it at this meeting. So I think what we need to do, in my own opinion now, is work with the town manager and the board of, it's not the Board of Select People, what is it now? Selectmen? Oh, it's still the Board of Selectmen? Okay, sorry, okay. Whoever you guys are, okay? And working with,
We're called other things, but Board of Selectmen.
and working with town council and see if we can get this resolved as quickly as we can so that we can basically put it aside.
We do have, that was vetted deep as the site, right after the site and prior to the site's final selection, so.
I
we
read the original stuff that you had, and I know it's preliminary, but I didn't want to release that as a public document until you've, both of you had a chance to basically make sure that the town council and probably the school committee town council are on the same page, even though they might not agree, but at least know where we are on it.
What are you looking for from the school committee?
They just asked if their attorney could participate.
No, but you said some kind of indicator which they weren't willing to give.
Well, I was wondering if the school committee would feel that this was a viable plan to move forward with, and they weren't prepared to come to that conclusion at this point in time.
Yeah, I think the feedback last time that they gave was they won't be prepared until they have a feasibility study for the South School, whenever that happens. Was that still what they
No, they didn't
articulated?
really talk about that too much. Okay, because we ended up talking about the South Elementary School. The school committee talked earlier in their meeting about the statement of interest that's been put into the MSBA for the South Elementary School, and that's something that's gone in. It's been, I think what they said was 9 years. It's been 9 years that they've been putting this in to come forward. But one of the things that we brought out and we brought to the attention of the school committee was that once they have a feasibility study underway, one of the things the MSBA is going to be looking for is whether or not to take the existing school and just repair it or renovate it and put an addition on, or two, build a new school on another site, or three, build a new school on the same campus. And we pointed out that if you build a new school on the same campus, similar to what we did with the high school project, then the MSBA will provide a grant funding towards the abatement and demolition of the existing building. If you build a new school on a separate site, they won't do that, and it's totally up to the town to figure out how they want to address it. So that's where we kind of ended up on that, and I'm glad that they asked us to make the presentation. I think that the professional team did a really good job on this, and I appreciate it, and I think we're moving along.
Mr. Chairman, can I just, I want to compliment staff on this, because after the December 19th indication of this as the preferred site, as chair of the Board of Selectmen, the first thing, literally, I was not out of the parking lot before I called the chair of the school committee to alert her that this was under active consideration as the preferred site. And from that point through Tuesday and ongoing, staff, the manager, the superintendent, senior staff team on the municipal side, the school department senior staff, including members of the school committee and Board of Selectmen, have had multiple engagements with folks on the school side, including looking at the entire approximately 50 acres of property in the vicinity of the South School and other options to address the short and long-term concerns that the school department has to meet the facilities needs that they have. And in that process, sharing perspectives, with particular help by the chiefs, on the important public safety improvements for that part of town that will come from relocating. So I can say that the engagement with the school department, from staff up to the school committee, leading up to Tuesday and then the Tuesday's meeting, has been really good and productive, informative, and it's ongoing.
Okay, thank you. Robin?
Did we get an indication from them that if we had a favorable legal opinion, that they're going to support us?
Um, um,
No?
No.
And I'm not trying to be flip, but again, this is
No,
time.
no, actually, they can either support us, be actively against us, or stay neutral. So,
I think it's the same conversation from when they came to our last meeting and presented, where they just don't know. They don't know what they're going to need, and they won't know until that potential feasibility study is done. So they can't, and the school committee, I don't think has any role in supporting this. I think it's more of this group and then the town.
well,
So
I agree with you.
I can't see like them making a positive an affirmative motion in any way, or taking any action,
Now,
motion, but I also, the feedback I don't think has changed since this has been presented.
well, I think that as our committee and our professional staff, we're offering to make sure that we keep in contact with the school committee and the school department so that they know what we're doing and how we're moving forward. But to be honest with you, and I may be called a heretic for saying this,
Careful.
in the long run, this building committee has to convince the town meeting representatives, and those are the ones that are going to make the call as to whether or not we build it there or not.
Mr.
So-
Chairman, without reading too much into what I anticipate is being asked for is a legal opinion that can be, shared with the public and not full of legal analysis. The bottom line is that the advice we've received is town meeting is the body that would have the authority to decide that this site will be used for public safety building, which is what they have anyway, because they have to vote the appropriation. So that's where the decision will be made, and that's the body that has the authority to make it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robin?
No, I concur, and it ultimately is in the hands of town meeting.
I agree. Okay.
So I think is.
I think we're all agreed here? Okay, good. Okay. Sort of agreed. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'd like to move onward here because we got a big presentation you guys have to make tonight on the program. Can we have a short progress status report from either Pomeroy or Doran Whittier and what you've been doing to date and where you are?
Sure. Over the last month, really, we've continued our bi-weekly working group meetings, and working really by email in between those meetings when things pop up. A big push had been our working with, as Bob said, the school committee and members, that are part of the school committee and the schools themselves to get ready for our meeting, which happened Tuesday night. So we prepped for that and put together that presentation. And the biggest push over this time has been looking at our program, and we'll go over this tonight, and looking at efficiencies that we could find by working with both chiefs and the working group, and finding a way or any really savings of space or square footage that we could try to work this number down any way we could. So we've been looking at doing that without cutting any program. What we don't want to do is look too small and put the building really at peril from the beginning. So we've just been looking at efficiencies that both chiefs can live with, and we know that the future is still built into the building itself. So that's really been our push and biggest focus over the past month.
Okay, thank you very much. And now for the meat and potatoes of tonight. Okay, for this building committee, we have to really understand what the program is that's being recommended by the two chiefs in conjunction with other town staff, so that we can understand it and we can talk about it if we're questioned on it. And I think you guys have a little presentation for us, so why don't you go ahead and we'll listen.
And that's all in front of you as part of your packets, too, because I know the screen's tough to read.
Yeah, okay, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those who are not aware of the process overall, we started many months ago by giving some questionnaires to both chiefs to review in great detail things like staffing, deficiencies within the building, future projections, a whole laundry list of items to help us determine what their program would need to be long-term. So a lot of detail and effort went into that. It was a very thorough process. From that, we did come up with a program that we have been continuing to revise, as Taylor mentioned. What we have on the screen right now is a summary, and you have a copy of that before you. And this is broken down into a number of categories for both fire, police, and also shared as a combined public safety facility. The first thing we want to note, the first left-hand column breaks down each of the sections of the building by visitor area, administrative area, living or support area, operations, infrastructure, and also a grossing factor, which takes care of horizontal circulation and shafts, things of that
I think
nature.
everybody understands it, but do you want to go over what a grossing factor is?
Yes. So when we originally design and lay out a plan for a building, we factor in each individual space that we've programmed, but one of the things that we can't program is every single corridor that's going to go into the building, because we just don't know how the building will lay out when we're doing the raw data. So we set aside a number to account for that circulation, as well as things like wall thicknesses, mechanical shafts, other parts of the building that would not be necessarily occupiable or programmed space. And it gives us a foundation that we can work with.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, the next column here is the existing space for each building. And we really wanted to make sure that we had an understandable baseline to compare to. Right now, the fire department has about 12,400 square feet in their existing facility. The police department is just under 21,000 square feet. And there was a previous study done in June of 2018. So as a comparison, that programming study looked at fire and suggested that it go from that existing 12,400 square feet up to around 30,000 square feet, just under 30,000. For police, a recommendation of going from just under 21,000 to just under 25,000. And then they also had an additional 7,700 or so square feet of shared space between those two departments as a combined facility. Our work to date, we started with numbers that were a little bit higher, and as Taylor mentioned, we've been working to optimize that. When we last met a month ago, for the fire department, we had a total of 30,687 square feet. For police, 30,410, and shared space of 8,024 square feet, for a total of 69,120 square feet. And that was about 6,500 square feet larger than the previous study, which totaled 62,532. So we've been working with the chiefs to optimize the plans as much as possible, look for areas for savings, but while also maintaining that room for future growth. So we've been able to do that, and we've taken down those square footages through some great work with the chiefs and their teams. So what we're currently at for fire department is 28,352, which is actually a little bit under the previous study from 2018. The police station, a total of 27,777 square feet, which puts us about halfway between the previous study and where we were last month. And then for combined space, we're at 6,582, which is also less than the previous study, for a total of 62,712. So we've reduced the building by 6,408 square feet. That maintains for fire 644 square feet of growth in terms of dorm space and some administrative space. For the police department, that maintains 3,154 square feet of growth. They're growing rapidly, and they're growing faster than the fire department is at this point. And for the shared space, that 6,582 includes already room for growth built into that. That's not space that we have currently. and that includes things like the EOC and training room, as well as fitness and a few other items. So that's sort of the general breakdown. Are there any questions about that before we get into any additional detail? No? Okay. All right, there's a lot of detail here, and I won't go through all of it, but there's six pages of spreadsheets here for the two departments. But what I will do is highlight a few items. Right now, I'm currently in the fire department. Sorry, thank you, page 2. All right, and I'm going to go towards the bottom, towards the operations area.
I think before you do that, you
Yes.
might want to go over some of the column headings here.
Sure, absolutely. The first large column on the left are the room or space names, and that just breaks this down by the same categories as you saw on the previous slide for visitor areas, administrative areas, living areas for fire, operations areas, infrastructure, and then area increases, which is that grossing factor that I mentioned. All right, the next column is the estimated existing square footage, which again are the numbers that we just talked about, what they have currently. Next 3 columns are the previous study from 2018 broken up. Some of those you'll see under number of rooms, you'll see a 0.5, and that means that it's half of what they considered shared between the two departments. So the other half of that is located in the police department program. All right, the next 5 columns are basically all of the calculations that break down based on projected staffing, room sizes, based on our experience on other projects, industry standards, code minimums for spaces, things like that. And we factor in the size of those spaces times the number of people that are going to be in those spaces, and then we come up with a suggested room size. The next 3, which are space needs allocation, high, medium, and low, we then take those spaces, the area that we came up with for each space, and try to prioritize that so that we can track that through the project and have an understanding if we need to reduce some space, we understand where to look to do that.
Oh, good.
Or if we need to hold on to some space, we know what's more important than other spaces. So it's pretty important for us to go through and prioritize that. The column hazard or security zone, sort of self-explanatory, but it really helps us break down the building on the fire side based on areas that may be contaminated after a call. We want to make sure we limit those contaminations from spreading throughout the building, so it helps us zone the building properly. It also helps us organize the building from a security standpoint, separating the public from private uses. And on the police side, that goes even a little bit further once you get into things like detainee areas. The next couple columns are used for us in the planning phases. It helps us determine if a space included in footprint needs to be on the first floor, so we have an understanding of how big that footprint's going to be on the site. The next column indicates whether or not that space could be shared between the two departments, followed by a parking column, and that helps us determine if those spaces are going to be occupied full-time and would require parking to be associated to them. We also have columns for future growth, so that we know how many of those spaces and what size of offices are specifically set aside for the future. We want to make sure that we keep track of those, and that if we do need to reduce the building, we're not taking out all of that future growth. That corresponds to the next column, which is space occupied by, so we understand who would be in that office either now or in the future. And then we have some additional comments as we go across. A lot of very detailed information there. And as I mentioned, we've been going through this for several months now. And so we've really, I think, done a pretty good job with both departments narrowing this down.
So in general, could you explain on the left-hand side, you have certain groups, visitor area, admin areas, and what the differentiation is between the two? I guess the visitor areas is where anybody, like any of us, could walk in
That's
Yeah.
correct. It's where the general public may go, but not necessarily go further without being escorted. So general areas in the front of the building, so like a meeting room, lobby areas, bathrooms, things of that nature. Administrative areas, these would be office spaces. Some would be first floor, some would be second floor, but these would be spaces that typically the public would not have access to unless they were invited in. Under living spaces for fire, these would be spaces that would be occupied around the clock. So dorm rooms where the fire department would be sleeping, their kitchen, living room, things of that nature. Operations areas would be, for fire, that would be maintenance bays, the apparatus bays, anything that would be directly associated to daily operations with fire apparatus, any type of gear storage, decontamination, things of that nature. And infrastructure, it's pretty self-explanatory. That would be mechanical systems, electrical rooms, also elevators, stairs, things of that nature.
Wouldn't these typically be shared spaces, or?
They are shared spaces. Under infrastructure, you'll notice under the possible shared column, there's a dot on each one of those.
Oh, I see it, okay.
So those are indicated as shared.
Mr. Chairman, through you,
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
the areas that are striked,
Yes,
does that mean they're no longer in the plan?
that is correct. Those
Thank you.
areas are not being looked at anymore.
So there are over 20 areas that we've taken out of this plan?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. The areas that you have in here, are any of these areas mandated by state regulations or federal regulations?
To the degree of building codes or accessibility codes, things like the number of bathrooms, those would be mandated. There's more mandates on the police department side when you get into the detainee area. That's regulated by the Department of Health.
Okay.
So there's more mandates there. Most of these, though, are just associated with normal use of the building.
I think also, from the standpoint of the size of the bays, for example, in the aprons and things like that, it's not really a nice-to-have, it's a must-have to have certain size bays, the apron for the fire trucks. So they're not necessarily mandates, but they're required, if you will.
Understood, okay.
Thank you.
But
Yes, they're required.
Sometimes, I'm not sure, and I thought maybe that, probably with the police department, they might have more mandates than, but the fire department may have some, and I was just curious to see if there were any, okay?
The fire department would have needs as far as decontamination areas, things like that, that would be required for them to be able to do their job on a daily basis. And then also, the size of those spaces is very much dictated by the number of staff that would be using the building.
Okay. Chief Laracy, I probably asked this question before, and you probably heard this question before, but why do we need a maintenance bay?
Because it's easier for the mechanic to have a place to work.
Okay, your mechanic is actually a specialist as opposed to
He's
a
actually, he's
generalized.
an emergency vehicle technician who works on all of our apparatus, from our staff vehicles to our ladder truck.
It's my understanding they have special equipment, they also, special tools that they have.
Well, I mean, he definitely has special tools. What he doesn't have in this current building is a height in his bay to even lift a cab to work inside. So if he has to work on the engine of a piece of apparatus, he has to pull it out in any type of weather to make the repairs. And he has no lift system, and in that current building at Station 1, it has a pit that he actually climbs down and is able to work underneath the apparatus, which you don't see anymore due to environmental reasons and stuff like that.
If I could, the importance of maintaining that type of a bay and that type of a service in-house is that when we look at the purchase price of these engines and ladders, they're exorbitantly expensive, and we rely on them to last a very long time. That level of consistent maintenance, that level of proper work being done internally where it's monitored by the chief on such expensive equipment is
Yeah,
critical.
absolutely. And he's not just doing maintenance, he's actually doing engine repairs, pump repairs, major work that if we went outside, it'd be thousands of dollars. And this just gives him that area to work, because right now he just doesn't have the space. And I know Tuesday, when we looked at the space needs, I think we took that maintenance bay preliminary from an 80-foot bay, which is a regular bay, down to a 60-foot bay. So it would allow, a piece of apparatus and maybe a staff vehicle or a smaller vehicle to be in there working at the same time. And the purpose of that is, what happens now, if he's working on something and he needs to order parts, and he has to wait and he can't move that apparatus, then, he just can't get in there with another vehicle. It'll allow him to at least have two in there, 1.5, not 2 full engines, a ladder and a couple staff vehicles.
Okay, so one of the items under the operations area is called a firehouse concession storage. Could you tell us what that is?
Yep, so that's the house fund where the firefighters have their, get their T-shirts, get their jackets, and any of the equipment they may need.
Okay. All right, and the SCBA fill and compressor booths and a few others. What does SCBA stand
So
for?
self-contained breathing apparatus, those are the air packs on our backs that they wear. So it's a room to have the compressor to fill those and a filling station as well, combined.
Excellent, okay. Now, under administrative area, we have, I know your command structure is different than the police department's command structure. So you have a chief, a deputy chief, you have captains, and
So my day staff, command staff is chief, deputy chief, EMS lieutenant, EMS fire prevention lieutenant, and a training captain,
okay, and
and our administrative secretary.
okay, so under living arrangements, I remember this came up with Fire Station 1. You have single occupancy staff dorms. I think everybody is in favor of that. Do you have special areas for your senior officers?
We have offices, dorms built into this, and once again, on Tuesday, we reduced our number of dorm rooms down. We took away 3 of them.
Okay, and you also show in the living area a fitness room. Was it the idea to have each department with a fitness room, or is it a shared fitness room?
So it's a combined,
There'll be a combined fitness room?
correct.
Okay, and let's see. You have a men's locker room and a women's locker room.
So
Correct.
Yeah, that's actually combined. It's one open locker area.
That's what I thought, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, there was two line items. If you go over, there's a combined 840 square feet for that. So that is an open area with lockers where staff will get their clothes and then take it either into their dorm room or into a shower toilet changing room to change.
Okay,
For efficiency, we kept it as one open room.
okay, and I notice you obviously have kitchen and dining, and Chief, I want to know if you're going to take that god-awful stove and the second floor dining kitchen and move it to a new facility, because I hope you don't.
We just replaced our 70-year-old stove probably about
Fuck,
6 months
thank
ago.
God, God, that was awful. Sorry. Okay, thank you. And this is a little bit harder question for you, Chief. Currently, in Fire Station 2, you have your office plus your deputy chief, conference rooms, and your administrative staff. If your indication is you're going to move into a new public safety building, what are your plans, or what do you think the plans will be for the space that you're leaving?
So where we're looking to move out of the downtown area, and just say whether it's Park Street site, would be looking to staff 5 people at Station 2 instead of 3. And that will be an engine and an ambulance to get better coverage throughout the town. So by doing that, we'd need more room, dorm space, we need, some more offices. So we'd basically take the second floor eventually, that is 3/4 administrative, and equip that down the road, so we have future growth for that station as well.
Okay, so in this appropriation, will we need to address that, or can it be something that can be done later?
My goal was to address it later, but I don't know if we,
You okay with that?
that'd have to be a question for the committee. If we could address minor upgrades, It would, nothing would be structural. It'd be, moving walls. That would be it.
I understand, but I don't want to be in a situation where Paul has nothing to do, so.
Paul's saying, do it if we can.
Just want to make sure Paul has something to do later on, so, okay. Okay, does anybody else have any questions about the program?
Yeah, I've got just one question regarding the administrative areas. I'm just reading through this, and I see that there are similar types of functions on both the police side and the fire side. And this has to do with operations, file storage, archival storage, general storage, conference rooms. Has there been any thought about combining these areas?
Chief McNamara, do you want to address that?
So I'll address file storage. We have a significantly larger amount of file storage archive storage that we're required to have. That's just law enforcement that no one else can have access to. So that would address that. Conference rooms, I would say that to try and combine that into one is more difficult because we do have different functions that operationally we would both want to use a conference room for more often than not, just even staff meetings or interviews for potential candidates coming up. Just so many different things that we do operationally. Currently, right now, they have some of the same things at Station 2 that they utilize that for, and we do the same in our building. So as far as a conference room, I don't see us being able to combine that. And our assistants, I don't think we can share any of the space. We just have different things that we have to have different securities for with regards to the police department.
Yeah, I think some of your storage, I think you told me a couple of years ago, is really storage that can't be looked at unless it's by a police officer or touched by a police officer, so you can't really have other people in there. Okay, so that's my understanding too. Okay, thank you. Is anybody else? Joe?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just as a question, are there any items that you have removed from this plan that you typically see in other plans that you have put forward?
No, what we've done is remove additional future growth, but maintained a level that everybody still feels comfortable with to this point. We haven't taken functionality out of the building, though, just optimized the facility.
Did you use a certain method in order to keep that future growth number at a number that is reliable, or reasonable, I should say, not reliable?
Right. I'll refer to the chiefs as far as their thoughts on future growth, but it was really trying to project out as long-term as possible, but also compromising on the size of the building from a cost standpoint.
And then lastly, Chief, to your comment about going from an 80 square foot, I can't remember what you used, bay for
80 foot, yep.
it to a 60. What's the detriment to go from an 80 to a 60?
So it's important to note, I was only talking about the maintenance bay.
Okay,
Okay, all the other apparatus bays will be full 80-foot lengths.
okay, thank you,
So it won't affect our apparatus bays.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on the fire department? All right, let's go to the police department.
Okay. So, police department is set up in exactly the same way as the fire department. The main difference here for police is that there is no living facility. Instead, we have support areas. This would be staff lockers, toilet and shower areas, things like a training simulator. We have the firing range listed here, and this is one of the items that the chief has recently felt that she'd be willing to look at as an ad alternate going forward, so not taking it out of the project, but by pulling it out as a separate line item to determine whether or not it's affordable long-term for the project. So we've pulled that sort of to the side, but things of that nature. Some of the other compromises that we have made and the chiefs have made is taking the shared training room from 100 people down to 75 people. They felt that was still maintainable long-term. On the police side, they also gave up a couple of cells in the detention area. And then I mentioned the firing range. On the fire side, I should also mention, Chief Laracy they did give up some dorm space and some locker space as well. Any particular questions on the police side that I can answer, which I'd be happy to do?
Yeah. Actually, a couple for Chief McNamara. Under the admin area, you have something called Family Services. Could you tell us what that's about?
So many times we're dealing with entire families when it comes to our SROs, or if we have taken a child through DCF and taken it out of the home, we have to hold on to the child for a significant amount of time until we get other state agencies to come in. So that's really what that room is for.
Boy, your mandate is really enlarged over time, so.
Well, with the criminal justice reform and a lot of changes, what we can and cannot do with juveniles that we deal with has impacted us.
I remember when I was working on this about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the things that was in the police station was a office for a district attorney from Norfolk County. Is that still in here?
So we have a court prosecutor that works out of the,
It's
of the
one of your
court.
officers?
Yes.
Okay, but
It's a
at that time, they said that they had a special place, so if a district attorney sent somebody down, that they would have their own office to work from, and we don't have that here?
no.
Okay. Have you guys run across that before, Alan, John?
No.
No? Okay. Well, that was a while ago, so what can I say? Okay. I will also, to tell the two chiefs that a couple of years ago, we had a similar conversation, and Chief Laracy graciously said that if your office was 2 square feet bigger than his office, that would be acceptable to him. Is that how you recall it, Chief? Exactly, okay. But in this case, we have the same size office for both chiefs. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Let's see. The locker rooms. Do you designate locker rooms between your senior officers and your patrol people, or how do you do that?
Yes, well, currently, right now, only in the men's locker room in our station is there a separate locker room for superior officers. That was never built into the women's locker room. So the women's locker room currently is just one open locker room with 10 lockers. And in the men's locker room, there is, I believe it's 12 lockers in the superior officers area, and then the remainder is in the rest of the men's locker room.
Has the architect accounted for expansion in those areas?
We have.
Because I know
Yes.
we've talked about this before. Okay, all right, very good. And what is a training simulator?
So the training simulator is really a room with no windows so that we can do virtual training, basically a big video game, which you have interaction with, and there'll be an officer that's trained to run the simulator, and whatever your actions are, they can create a reaction on the video, and then it's a scenario that you go through for different types of training, whether it's a taser, OC, or a firearm.
Okay,
If I can add to that too, that when we moved the firing range to the ad alternate, we made sure that the training simulator stayed as part of the base of the building so that they would still have that option to do some training.
okay, good. Now, the central call station is in
Dispatch?
Dispatch, thank you. Central Dispatch is in the police station now. It's under your department, as I understand it. How is this set up? Is it set up as a separate area, or is it integrated into the entire thing? I know the dispatchers are normally civilians, correct?
So currently, right now, we have a police officer and 2 civilian dispatchers in our call center, in the central dispatch, under the police department. And in this public safety building, it would still be on the police department side of the building. And again, we work closely with the fire department, because obviously we're dispatching their calls, to give them input as to how we impact their operations in the dispatch. But it still would be under the police side.
Okay, but do they have their own separate area, or their own
So-
toilet rooms, or,
Currently, right now, they do not have,
oh, I know what they,
in this, they would have their own, just adjacent to the dispatch area, they would have the locker area and a kitchenette and a bathroom right.
that was my
contained
question, yes, okay,
Within the dispatch area.
okay,
To note, too, that there's accreditation requirements in order to maintain.
Correct.
It's part of.
okay. Based on what you have come up with in terms of the central dispatch area, is there a potential, and don't get crazy when I say this, is there a potential to go to a regional dispatch using this facility?
It's a hard question to answer. It would depend on the size of that. Yeah, whether or not that this would be large enough would be hard to say, but it would probably need to be expanded on if it was to go regional.
Okay. Would you have the area to expand on it if it came about? Not really?
Not with the current design, unless you built out to the front of the building, right.
Okay. I only bring this up because a public safety building I know of in the Worcester area started out with just their own dispatch center, and the next thing they picked up the small town on the left, and they picked up the small town on the right, and then the small town in back of them, and it seems to be working out for all of the towns, but I didn't know if that was even possible here.
So with some of the towns that surround us, I know of regionals that are starting up, which involves Easton, Norton, Foxborough, and Mansfield. Avon just built a brand-new station, and they have a state-of-the-art dispatch center for their own dispatch. I don't know if they'd be willing to give that up at some point in the future. Canton has its own dispatch, Sharon has its own dispatch in its brand-new public safety building, so regionally, I don't know if there would be an appetite for other towns to come to Stoughton.
Okay.
Joe?
Anybody? Yes, Mike?
Just to give you an example, Norfolk County Control in Holbrook is a regional dispatch, and they're expanding, and they got 12 stations, dispatch stations. So to me, to answer that, we're not equipped to be a regional.
Okay,
in this
that was my
yeah,
question.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Does I think I understand most of what you have down here. Of course, I'm not wearing my reading glasses, so I'm not sure I can see it all. So. Cell monitor officer matron, they actually use that term still?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
It's still
Okay.
called matron training, yes, yep,
There you go.
still a term.
That is a required.
And that's a requirement.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Thank you. Okay. Fine. Anybody else have any questions about the police station program, or any questions about anything on that? Okay, we're good. Shared spaces? You don't have it. Okay, so
Yeah, no,
why don't you just talk about it?
yeah, so shared spaces primarily focus around the training EOC space, which can accommodate 75 people, plus have a breakout space associated with that. And as part of the function of the EOC, would have a small kitchenette to accommodate anybody that would be there for extended hours. There's also a fitness room that can accommodate, I believe, was 10 people at once, that both departments are able to use. And then the infrastructure spaces, in addition to that, would be shared between both departments. So those are the primary areas that would be shared.
Okay. And the training area, would that be open to other public committees to come in and be able to use?
Yes, it would be.
Okay. Once again, this other public safety building I'm familiar with, They have a really nice training room that they use all the time, but they also use it for regional training. They'll have people come in from from various departments from other towns, fire or police, to come in and listen to somebody give a presentation or something. So this would be available to do that.
Absolutely, and sized for that.
So we also sized it, and it's so that you could have 50 students in an area to work if you're actually doing a practical aspect of the training. And, you know, one of the things with new public safety building is you can host a lot of training, and when you host a training, you usually get free seats. So you don't have to pay the tuition for someone to attend that. So that's the enticement of a good training room that, in a centrally located area, easy off the highway to get to. You know, instructors will come to your department and you'll get free seats for it.
All right, so based on the program that we just talked about, and I'll ask each of the chiefs to respond, in terms of your view of what the current and future growth is for, say, the next 15 years, will this accommodate that, or the next 10 years or 5 years? Chief Laracy, do you want to try first?
So I don't know if it was mentioned earlier that Tuesday when we sat down as a working group, we took about 6,000 square feet or a little bit more off this building, and the areas we talked about where they are now. I had a chance to visit some stations, Mansfield, for instance. Their apparatus bays were just set up the way we wanted them, with a maintenance bay, the EMS supply room off of it, SCBA, turnout gear, perfect. This here, I don't see any room to reduce that. In our living areas, administration, the only extra area that we did add, and that we don't have now, was an assistant fire chief, which is actually not a filled position, but it is a position in the contract that the town can fill at a later date, because that would be, I'm the only individual up there, well, firefighter that's not in the union, and if we hired an assistant chief, they'd be outside the union too. So that's really the only future growth up in the staff area. Dorm room space, we have it. I think we'll be all set.
Okay.
Yep.
Chief McNamara?
As Chief Laracy, I have also visited a few police stations, and
Oh, yeah.
sitting with the officers and some of the command staff that sat on the working group, as a whole, we feel very comfortable with the building that we have currently worked towards for the public safety building, and compared to what we have today and what we would need for the next 15 years.
Okay, great. Thank you very
Joe,
much.
if I can add one more
Yes,
thing.
Mike.
Prior to that working group meeting on Tuesday, I sat down with the shift on duty, and we looked over the layout of the proposed fire station and asked them, you know, we have to cut. Where can we cut? And working with, 11 firefighters on shift, we went through that whole plan. We went through the program, and which they were all part of in the beginning when we designed this whole thing. And that's when we saw the reductions that we got on Tuesday of combined 6,000. But that was working with the group, knowing we got to look out for the future. And so it made me feel good incorporating them, having 11 different opinions on the future, because, most of them are going to be there for another, 10, 20 years, so.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Hill, how are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
Okay.
To Chief Laracy's point, too, I just wanted to point out, up on the screen right now, is the floor plan of where we're currently at from a design standpoint. This plan does not include the 6,000 square feet of reductions that we talked about Tuesday. This is the plan that was presented to the group before we made those reductions Tuesday. So our next iteration will include those reductions. But I wanted to just give you a sense of where we are to date and how the building works, so you have a general idea. And as far as layout goes, the front door is right in the middle here with a lobby and a training area. Right off of that is dispatch, public records, and access to interview rooms, other spaces that the public would generally come in for, such as permits, as well as a triage space. On the left are the fire apparatus bays and all of their support spaces. To the right of that, some police administration. Centrally located would be police locker rooms, toilets, showers, things of that nature. In the back, we have the shared fitness room, which would be off the parking lot for staff. Also, staff entrance for fire would be located here where the red dot is. Staff entrance for police, which would be separate, would be located here, which would be adjacent to their briefing room and break room. To the right of that is what we previously had shown as the firing range and associated spaces. In the next iteration, we'll show that integrated in a little bit different way so that it can be done as an alternate, so it won't be necessarily integrated within the boundaries of the remainder of the building, but it'll all be outside of that so that it can be easily removed from the plans if needed. And then to the right of that would be all of the detention areas, sally ports, evidence storage, and garage space. This is all the first floor. Second floor, which is administration, is divided between fire and police. So you would come up from the elevator if you were the public, if you were escorted up or invited up, and you'd immediately be greeted by someone from either police or fire on the administrative side, who would then guide you to where you would need to go next. On the right would be all of the police administration spaces. On the left, fire administrative spaces, and then in the back would be all of the fire living spaces, which would also be adjacent to a training deck where ladder training can be done for fire. And then there's a lot of roof space available for future growth. And that whole roof would be structurally ready for an additional build out in the future should you need to have room to grow, as well as there's room on the site for additional expansion as well. And then the only other thing we have is a potential mechanical penthouse, which would be up on the one more level just to keep it centrally located. But these are all moving pieces right now, and we'll continue to update this as we go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. The next item on the agenda is a little bit more difficult, establishing a project target budget.
Excuse me, Joel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we move on to that, could I just make one request of Dora and Whittier? And the reason I'm making this request is that to the average layman, we have no clue how big a fire station is or a police station. You guys have done a lot of these. Is it possible for you to put together a list of the projects that you've done and where our project fits in from a square footage area?
Certainly.
Taylor, could you do the same thing?
We'll include a cumulative list of Pomeroy
Great.
and Durham Whittier projects.
And when you do the size of the buildings and the number of people in the town, so that we have some
Comparable communities.
comparables, so we can take a look at. That'd be great. It's a good idea.
You'd have to also add in staffing.
That's right, staffing
Yes.
makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one other thing? I know
Sure, go ahead.
we've talked about this before. Some of the listening I've been doing about this project, similar to the high school, similar to some other buildings, that are challenges for us, is to help the public understand what the restraints are in ability to provide public safety on the facilities we have, how it affects their lives, safety now, how these improvements will make for a safer town, because we have a police building that from the street looks pretty good. Those of us who've been doing this work and been digging this problem for some time are aware that the front of the book doesn't really tell you what the pages say inside. My concern is that the decision that the town meeting will make, and if it goes to the voters, that the voters will make, will be largely an emotional decision, in the sense that they will be evaluating whether they trust the information that they're receiving, whether they can rely on the perspectives that would need more space, and whether they can appreciate how this additional facility will make them safer and the community better. In order for this to succeed, we've got to get that message out, and we've got to start doing that messaging a month ago, because we have taken a long time to get to this point. A satisfaction of what's working must be working because it's working, right? Although it's not. And we need to do that education. We saw in the high school project that when the public really understood the deficits in that structure, and when the public really understood the deficits in the library, they got behind both projects, and their projects we're proud of. That's what we need to do here. These are harder things, I think, for many in the public to understand, because hopefully most of the public doesn't interact with police and fire all that often. But when they do, it's really critical that the services be rendered. And I really want to close by emphasizing we've got to get that work done in order for this to succeed. More on the police side than the fire side, because the disaster of the Freeman Street Fire Station is much more well-known than the deficits in the police station. The chief has been great in trying to educate us all. It's only we now have to move outside of this group for that kind of work.
Okay. Once again, I'd like to get back to the budget, which we seem to be dancing around a little bit, so I've had some discussions here and there. Joe Palermo and I were talking about it a little bit, and what I would recommend to the town manager is that maybe we establish a target budget, not an absolute budget, but one that we would move toward and never go below. If that would be reasonable, and that would be a combination of what we feel we can
I'm
do.
always happy to go below.
Yeah, I know that, but it'd be nice if it happened, but the point is that we need to come up with a dollar value that we have to think. I've heard a number of people in town come up with a variety of dollar values that they think we said, but we haven't really. And I'd rather get to a point where we can say, yes, we are shooting to get to a particular budget value. And at one point, I thought it might be about $40 million. However, Mr. Palermo and I decided it would probably be more than that, based on our own past experience anyway. So do you have any thoughts, Robin, on what you think this budget should be?
Yeah, we had talked briefly, I think, 2 meetings ago. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, if I could just add one thing. So since we've gone through the process of reduction, Durham Whittier actually went back to their estimator over this past week, and they've re-estimated what the building at that 62 and change square footage is. So I think before we get into that, they should just share really where that estimate is now. And again, it's a order of magnitude, but I think it'll be helpful to let us know kind of where we are, because I think we brought it under a mark that we were hoping to with some savings. So I'll let them speak to it more.
All right, you guys go ahead.
So where we were last time we spoke, if you look up on the screen, we'll focus on Site C. The combined public safety was $50 to $56 million for the roughly 69,000 square foot building. Now that we've been able to bring that down to about 62,000 square feet, you want to click that, Jason? We have a range of $46 to $51 million. So, you know, the work with the chiefs and their staff and the working group has been able to take anywhere from $4 to $5 million out of the project, depending on which end of the range you're looking at.
We understand, and we also understand that there are some unknowns in this particular site, including the cost of building out Fano Drive, as Mark has
That is
pointed out
correct.
before. Okay, and what that might cost and some other things involved. So I was hoping that we could at least talk about a number. Do you think $45 million would be a reasonable number as a target?
So just to give a little backup, when we originally had those numbers, I went in, I think it was 2 meetings ago, and I said, that's a tough number. And we were hoping to have something in the range of the mid to high 40s, which is about where we're coming in. And I mean, I think if we can look for a target of that 45 or below range, or 45 range, which we're close, and a lot does depend on the Fano Drive, I think we're in good shape. I'd want to remind everybody that the work on Fano Drive, however, not to go back to the discussion we started with tonight, but it is connected, that may tweak the price a little bit of this up, but that's going to be a benefit for whatever school use as well. So the cost will be borne on this project, but I do want to remind people, if there's $1 million or a $2 million swing on that somewhere, that will be a mutually beneficial infrastructure change or
Okay.
growth for the town. So if we come in at around that 45 plus some Fano Drive costs, given that that will be a general improvement for both schools and municipal, or education and municipal, then I think we're in a comfortable range of what seems reasonable when we look at what other facilities have cost around us, and at the fact that when we look at these program needs, the nice-to-haves have all been cut out at this point, and everything is really a must-have for appropriate growth. And if we're going to invest the money at this point, investing it for appropriate growth for the next 10 or 15 years in mind is critical for that.
I agree. Joe?
Robin, just as a follow-up from a side conversation we had about a month ago, the town's capacity to borrow versus on this project as a percentage of the project versus the rest of it being a debt exclusion, is that being considered at all?
Yes.
Considering that there's some things coming off in the next
Yes.
few years versus things that are going on?
Absolutely. We started looking at what may be rolling off and what we could incur within our own tax base and operating budget. And that's without counting any kind of major growth over the next few years that we might see with like a Park Street sewer, for example. So looking at just where we're at now, I think we can absorb some of it. I can certainly not say that we could absorb all of it at this
So when you're talking a number of 45, let's just say, use that number, that would not necessarily be a debt exclusion number.
No.
That would be
Some
just
of
a
that-
number. Some of that
that's-
could be
that's
potentially
just
capacity to
total
borrow.
building.
I
That's
agree, yeah.
the literal building, yes,
Right.
not the way we're going to fund it.
The debt exclusion could be less than that. I agree with you on
Right.
that, yeah.
I'm just, long-term, just looking at, I know that there's some stuff coming off just based on some of the things I've been reading, just going on the sites and stuff. So I was thinking about the ability to not put us in a situation where the operational budget becomes so more difficult, as I hear Finance Committee meetings talk about the end of the world, that we're able to put some further borrowing capacity back into the budget, but without killing the budget, in other words.
And if I could follow on that, I think one of the critical things we've started doing, and it's not directly related to the station, but related to what we're talking about with the capacity to borrow in the budget, we've started looking at a 5-year capital plan. We've implemented basically a rough capital plan. In doing that, what we proposed this year on the budget, basically, for borrowing is exactly what was falling off on the, so from the, and that's the lower end stuff, that's the little stuff, but we're able to maintain the infrastructure of this town, maintain our equipment, things that we need on a steady level while major debt falls off, and we're not falling behind on those other things. So I think part of this delicate balance is what can we absorb in the budget without sacrificing everything else in town? And I think right now, we're just being really prudent on that end. What we proposed is almost an exact offset. So we're not going to increase it all on that front, on the regular capital borrowing. And then in the meantime, as things fall off, we are going to probably increase, I think, a significant portion will fall off next year, and we will be able to add that on. So yes, I mean, I think that that's absolutely critical. We don't want to burden the budget more than we are. We're pretty lean and trim, but we will be able to absorb a little bit more next year.
Thank you.
Rick, did you want to participate in this?
Sure, thanks.
Since you sent me a big email on it, so.
Right, so 2 years ago, we had asked Hilltop Securities to do a debt model, create a debt model for us. All of our spending that's bonded at this point. So it goes out as far as the longest project we've got in the pipe today, and includes all the current work. At the time, it included warrant articles for that upcoming town meeting. It just needs to be updated with what has actually transpired between now and then, but you should clearly be able to plug the number in, the whole number, and see how bad it is, you know, on an annualized basis, how much of an impact there is. So we should do that immediately to know what, you know, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So, and my initial thoughts when I created all of this was that it was a $60 million price tag for a South School and a public safety facilities building. It was 30 for each, essentially. I think the school was going to be 60, but there's MSBA reimbursements. And
60 is actually pretty good for an elementary school right now.
yeah,
but we were going to get 54% of that back, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
As long as we built it in the same area. So I would think that that's our next step. You know, we shouldn't be guessing at this right now. We have the tool to be able to tell us what the impact of this will be. And we can play with that number, up or down, whatever we want to do, to arrive at what we think that the budget will tolerate over the next 20 years, but more importantly. The other thought was, when we were thinking about doing 60 million, actually 30 million for the original project, that we could absorb the whole 30 million into the budget and do that by taking anything that might be overages in the debt line. So for example, I think it was $500,000 this year that, you know, would have gone by town meeting to a separate stabilization account that there was an article in to establish to help fund this project, the peaks. So when the payments peak, and the model shows you exactly where that problem is, you use this fund to offset those peaks. And I thought FinCom was on board with this. They, you know, when I appeared in front of them, then they said yes, but for whatever reason, then voted unanimously not to do it, and I don't know why, but it still makes sense to me to be able to do that. So you're attacking it on two ends. So you can accommodate a certain amount of money, and you've provided for the peaks and the overages, you know, so you can manage through those times. But it was never built for 60 million or 51 million or whatever it might be. So those are my thoughts.
In terms of a,
Thank you. Go ahead.
in terms of a budget target, so as we start looking at the model and determining what debt service we can float versus what you need an exclusion to cover, which I'm going to just predict it's 20 million, but in terms of a budget target, I know, Robin, you mentioned 45 million, but would it be better for us to go somewhere in the middle of the range that we have here, so that we're not coming out today and saying it's 45 million, and then in 2 months, it's suddenly 50?
Well, the reduction in the size of the building, we've already talked about. I know from my own past experience, you can work with the architect in terms of determining type of materials you want to use. The most interesting thing about this particular building and this particular site, in my view, is, and I'm not an architect, is that this basically is hidden in the back on a lot. And as opposed to our new library building, which is right out in front on Park Street, this is basically around the corner type of thing. And it doesn't have to be as, I don't want to use the word monumental, but I can't think of any other thing to come up with it. So I think we can work with the architect, because you're clever architects, and we can come up with a bunch of really good stuff.
But to Selectwoman Howe's point, this is just a number at this point. And
It's a
yeah,
target.
We are absolutely not saying it will be a $45 million
No,
project.
and
Yeah,
in
that's
in that regard, I would like to kind of make it a little, memorialize it a little bit, and request that somebody make a motion that we accept a target budget of $45 million for this project, exclusive of the Fano Street done. Rick?
So I don't want this to sound like a stupid question, but why are you establishing such a hard line in the sand budget number right now?
It's a target budget.
I know, but the thing is, whatever you agree to here is what will be remembered.
That's correct.
When you go over it, if you go over it.
If we go
you're gonna
over
be-
it,
So I would say, if I was going to make a motion, I'd make it for 51 million. So, you know,
It's kind of a
and
chicken
I don't
and-
say quibbling
No, that's
about
right.
a couple of million here or there, but
It's kind of a chicken and egg question, though, because if we put it at 45 million, then they will value engineer it down to 45 million. And then as things come up and we have to account for changes, then it increases. But if we keep it at 51, they're only going to reduce it down to 51, and then
stop.
it might increase again.
well,
So,
I don't know if I agree with that. I think
As
that
a
we're gonna
committee, we
push
shouldn't
them
allow
to-
that to happen.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that, yeah.
yeah.
Joe?
So I'm always going to be reluctant on a target budget, just because of my history with schools, because you're 100% correct. And then what happens is that target number is the number, and now you're cutting and cutting to the point where 10 years you're coming back to discuss the building again. So my thought on this would be, let's let the professionals give us a number. After they give us the number, then we have to make difficult decisions. If we go that process, then there is no back room anything. It's always happening at this meeting. The professionals have given us a number, and then we work to get to the number that we think via debt exclusion, via borrowing, gets us a number. It's already a controversial project, folks. So we already have the naysayers. It's already happening. So if we're just straight with the number from day one, let the professionals do their work is what I suggest we do.
If I could follow on that, that option seems very reasonable to me. When the number we throw out is what we're talking about at the internal meetings, where I say, okay, I'd like it to get down to this number. But what I can assure you is if by some chance it got lower than that, we're going to present you the lowest possible number that internally is with staff and the architects and the project manager. What I would like to be able to present to this group is what we believe is the best building for the lowest price that we can possibly do. From there, exactly to your point, that's when the tough decisions happen at this level in a very public forum where we say, okay, this is what we as a staff think we need to make this building work as inexpensively as we possibly can do it on the taxpayer. From there, absolutely, then we start looking to cut. So I think at this point, that number that I share with you and share publicly is a number, though, that's sort of an internal guide. It doesn't mean that once we hit it, I'm going to say, okay, we're good. I'm probably still going to heckle them and say, well, can we cut this? What materials can we cut? What can we do for facade, blah, 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 and make it look the way we want, but not so expensive. We're going to work, we're going to work to continue to keep trimming that budget and maintaining a program that we all agree is a good program. So I say 45. If we get it to 42, all the better. And then if you say that's great, but we want to knock off another $1 million, then as a group, we start looking at that with, obviously, I would hope with the input of the chiefs, before we cut something critical. But again, yeah, very open process at that point. So,
Mr. Chairman, to echo what the manager and Joe have said, as someone who wasn't participating in some of the buildings that have not worked out so well for the town, my sense, and I think a sense of many in the community, is some of the problems there were driven by hitting a number that was unrealistic. And then the drive to an unrealistic number gave us buildings that fail or don't work, that embarrass us. We have Station 2 we couldn't use for 5 years. We have a police station that, depending on, it floods. The fact is, when you talk to folks who were in office at the time the police station was built or active in the town, they will tell you it never should have been built. And when you listen to the histories, the common denominator is that's what we wound up with because a commitment was made to hit a price tag, and they weren't able to move it. So in the emotional aspect of moving this project, you've got a sense in the town, which I frankly am concerned about, in that I agree with it. We shouldn't be spending all this money. But we need to spend this money for these facilities. Then you got a sense in the town that it's going to get screwed up anyway. So why do we want to spend the money? If we put a figure out there and move that number up in order to build a building so that it's a good building, the people have no confidence in what we're doing, we'll have less confidence in what we're doing. We should call it straight the whole way, get the professionals to tell us, and then take it so the public can see we're not going to do what happened in several of the buildings in the past that didn't work.
Well, the reason I brought this up is just to have the discussion we're having right now, which I think is important. Okay, I'm not worried about it. Jess has guaranteed that she'll get everything through the Finance Committee. Thank you, Jess. Okay, that's all right. All right, so I think the sense is that we're not going to hit a target budget tonight, and we'll take a look at it later, okay? Yes, Rick?
So I'd like to offer my services on behalf of the committee, if they'd like to re-engage with the debt model, because I'm so familiar with it, to be able to look at producing different scenarios if the town manager would agree to that.
Okay, it's fine with me.
Great.
All right.
Joel?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear on these numbers that we're seeing here. The 46 to 51 million is just construction costs?
No, it's the whole thing.
Project cost,
Total project cost, and it includes soft costs?
correct.
Okay, but it just does not include Fano Drive or the firing range, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It includes escalation out a year and a half.
I'm sorry?
It includes escalation out a year and a half.
Okay.
It doesn't does not include an owner's contingency, which you and I have talked about.
Okay, that was one of my questions.
It does.
Yes, it does.
It includes contingency.
It's a small amount, yeah.
We have a,
You have design contingencies. I don't want to
much
get into a
rotor?
discussion about contingencies tonight. That's a whole other thing. Okay.
So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about 46 to 51 million, that's an all-in cost.
Yes,
And-
it is, sir.
And it's not, well, we got to do the FF&E, and we got to do the all the other stuff.
The whole ball of wax.
The other thing I think is important to look at is the life cycle cost of a new building compared to the buildings that we have now. When we build a new building, they're going to be a lot more efficient than currently what we're paying, so just in the future, when we start talking to the town, we should have that in our pocket as well.
I agree, and I think the building code requires that you have to do a study of the heating and electrical cost now. I can't remember if it's the building code or it's a state requirement. I know in schools we've had to do it a couple of times.
Part of the energy code, that's right.
Part of the energy code, so what generally happens, and I know Joe has experienced this before, you take a building like Fire Station Number 1, which really isn't up to the energy code at this point in time. You get a similar sized fire station, you have it very efficient, but because it's up to code, the electrical cost ends up going up a little bit, okay? So, but you're right, that we have to take a look at life cycle costs, we take a look at operations costs for the annual budget, so we have to make sure that that's all factored in.
That's right, and we've actually had a first meeting with the working group with the mechanical engineers to start that process for life cycle analysis.
Excellent, very good. Okay, so the next one should be fairly short, and that's scheduled for town meeting consideration. I'm sorry.
Joe, I still
go
have
ahead,
one
Jess.
question. So, I just had one quick question about the firing range situation, because, we have Fano Drive that needs to be developed, and Mark's thrown out 2 million there. This is 1.8 million. I just wanted to know whether or not, this is truly like optional, or is it something that you definitely expect to have on the site? So could you just explain like what you're thinking about with that?
So the way we talked about it in the working group is that it would be an alternate at some point, so that's why it's designed on the backside of the building, that it isn't the reason that prohibits this project from going forward. So if we continue to have the simulator room, we just see in the future having more and more difficulty with outdoor ranges currently right now, and we're required to do this training with our firearms twice a year in low-light situations and also, during the daytime as well. So required training that we have to do, and we don't have a place to do it. We've been searching for a long time for different ranges, and we've been as far as Bridgewater, Medfield. We're currently utilizing the Fish and Game. That could end at any point. We just don't have a future where we're going to go, so at some point, we may need to put this facility in.
Okay, yes, Rick?
Could we get a number about what we think that would tack on to the project?
It says 1.8 million
It's
at the
1.8.
top of the sheet.
Okay.
Is it possible to use one of the buildings that we're vacating for that purpose?
There is a range in the Armory.
Yeah,
Oh, don't get started on that, please.
Well, I keep coming back because, one of the things that we need to be aware of when we make decisions is that when we pass on making decisions, there are costs that we wind up bearing. By not paying attention to that building, by not taking care of it, by not cleaning the gutters, simple as that, we look at a basic facility for public safety that we can't have. By not investing in just stabilizing the building, which we could have done, we deprive ourselves of an ability, and now we look at a $1.8 million price tag for a range when we already own one. So there are other things that hopefully we can do with that property, but I just want to emphasize again, like I was talking about these other buildings, we've got all these opportunities. Every time we don't do something, it's a decision that's better than doing what we should.
Thank you. The next one, like I said, is fairly easy. Scheduled for town meeting consideration. It's my understanding, Robin, that we have an article in the warrant now, or is that going to go ahead, or?
We have a placeholder in the warrant, and unless this committee feels otherwise, we will leave it there. And if, when we get to town meeting or prior to that, we realize we're not enough to bring forward, or we're not ready to bring forward to town meeting, we'll just,
I don't think we're going to be ready to bring it forward to annual town meeting, is what I think. I don't see it. I mean, we're not going to have the
well, the warrant's
development,
closed, so at this point, that night, we just pull it.
You want to pull it that night and do it that way
Yeah, I mean,
instead?
the warrant's officially closed, so I can't pull it anyway.
Okay.
We just wouldn't put anything in the book
Oh,
with it.
is the warrant closed now? Like, we can't put
Yes.
anything in?
No,
Oh,
warrant's-
then the next one, forget. Okay. The next item on my agenda, we'll forget about. Okay.
Well, if you just let the FinCom know that that's been pulled, or it's going to be pulled.
yeah.
Right, we would just let FinCom know,
Oh,
but.
Jess
Yeah,
is
we'll
here.
let- we'll let
Jess
the-
is here. And Joel's here.
Jess already
Jess
said
and-
she's going to
Jess
get
and
us
I
the
will
money.
do it together.
Excuse me, through the chair?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Through
Yeah.
the chair?
Huh?
Is what exactly was the article for that was put in?
The article was a very generic placeholder for borrowing for the construction of a
Public safety facilities building for $55 million. That was it.
So I was thinking a potential could be getting the land as a warrant article. Could that be used for that?
Well, we don't have to, if we don't have to purchase the land, the use of the school land, or
Yes.
our land with the school, or however we want to term that, is not, there's no borrowing and there's no zone change. So it really isn't a town meeting function.
Well, I don't
But
know, Bob, you,
Depends
The
on
change
what
in
the-
deed might be.
If the
There is-
change in
there
deed
is-
would be,
okay,
right.
Okay, so
That's why I don't want to
there is
pull it
no,
yet.
there is no deed revision that's going to be required.
Right.
This is our advice by town council. It is simply the vote when it was presented to town meeting to acquire had an aspirational phrase in it that for possible future school use. That means that if this is presented to town meeting would vote to rededicate the use for this portion for the public safety
Right.
building. That's, when we get the description from town council, that's essentially what it will say. So it is not a school use property. As I think has been said before, the schools have property where there are schools on it. Until there's a school on it, it's town property. Town meeting acquired it for a goal of a future school use. The question will be, if town meeting votes to put a public safety building on it, town meeting will be voting to change that designated possible use to a real use for public safety. That's essentially where it goes.
I would still hesitate on making, we don't need to make a decision tonight on pulling this
Right.
article. There's absolutely no reason we need to even go down that road at this point.
okay, but everybody should know, who doesn't know, like Jess and I know that there is an article, but I don't know if everybody knew that, so.
Yeah.
And the language in the article is the same language it would be if we were ready.
Okay.
Right, so one of the things that we've done in recent years on articles is adjusted the language to be less of what the text of a motion would be, and in order to save 6 or 7 lifetimes on the floor of town meeting on whether the motion went beyond the scope of the article. And so when the article is viewed as an agenda item, and then it's written, to take into account what is ready at the time it gets to the floor of town meeting, and the motion would be drafted at that time. So the motion by whichever committee advances it would be to authorize, to borrow whatever it is, the amount of, if there were a debt exclusion, and so much of that would be by debt exclusion, all that would be drafted at the time. So this article, if we decide to not go forward, this same article would be the same text on the next town meeting warrant, and the actual operative language would be in the text of a motion made on the floor.
Okay, Rick?
But I think the earlier discussion probably means that we'd have to have 2 articles. So one would be to change the original article when this land was
It can
acquired.
be done in the same, it can be done in the same.
It can, because this was a taking. This was not just
This
a
was-
simple
Is
change
this what
of
we're
the
getting the
deed.
legal opinion?
language.
Let this, we need to wait for the legal opinion.
This is why earlier on in this meeting, we asked Robin to contact town council at the request also of the school committee.
All right, so let me just sound like a broken record here. This has been going on for a decade, the status of that land.
Yes.
It is not a hard question. So, two people from the town manager and the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and their attorney sit with the school committee or the school chair and their superintendent and their attorney, and we just get this ironed out. I'm just saying, a decade has gone by where we have identified this site as the best possible site, but here we are talking about it months into the formation of this committee. I'm sorry to sound a little frustrated by it, but here we are again. We need to get this fixed.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next item, I'm going to have to roll over because I thought we could put something in the town meeting article, but the warrant's closed, so we won't. Okay. Public meetings and town website. The town website has been updated with all the meeting minutes on it. Thank you, whoever did that. That was great. Okay, well done. So that now I will tell people who happen to be watching this, if they go to the tab that says meetings, agendas and minutes, you will find our committee on there, and you will find all of the minutes, so you can all read them. The other thing that we have been talking about is a website, and you guys tell us where we stand on that?
At this point, really because we're waiting to hear on the school and what the, possible site was, we haven't really moved forward with putting any information out there. We can start to put out, the matrix that we've done and
I think that's a good idea.
the different, presentations we've done to date.
I think that's a good
We
idea.
can certainly, update that and get that going.
Okay, yeah, we'd like to get as much information out there as soon as possible.
Question.
Kristen?
Is that going to be part of the town's website as a
Or is it a
drop-down,
separate?
or is it
Good
going to be
point.
its own dedicated webpage?
Yeah, the way we talked about it would be on the town's website.
Okay.
Rather than having differing websites, it would just be confusing.
So you pop on to the section that says boards and committees, you find our committee, you would automatically go to that website. That's,
Sounds
okay,
great.
We
put it right
actually-
on the homepage, right?
Sorry, we actually
Okay.
met with Trish, who manages.
Okay,
things. She'll
yeah,
be
she
providing-
mentioned that she had been talking to you.
Yeah,
guys,
she's been
okay.
working with us on doing that, so I really didn't want to put anything up until we kind of talked a little bit about it here.
I think it was appropriate to have
agendas
the
and
school
minutes
committee presentation formally made to the school committee before
Sure.
we put that
Yeah,
in
all the
public.
presentations are public record, all the meeting minutes are public record. Those are the things that should go up there so people can look at them.
We can certainly do that.
Okay, future agenda items. One agenda item that is future is the consideration of the plot of land that Dick Fitzgerald brought up earlier in the meeting. Mark, I think you were around for that, so we might be able to figure out whether that is a viable piece or can work with what we're doing. Okay? Thank you. And the next meeting, I prefer to have these on the third Thursday of the month. The only reason we didn't do it this month is because school vacation is next month. So are we all good for the third Thursday in March? Hello,
Yes.
everybody? Janice, Jess, Joe?
What's the date?
I don't have the date in front of me. I suppose I could take out my smartphone and figure out how to find a calendar.
Okay.
Is that St. Patrick's Day?
That's the 17th.
Oh, sorry, what was,
Joseph's Day is the 19th, you're gonna have a lot.
sorry. God, I lived here all my life. Okay, and I think that does it, so I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, for information purposes, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry to take up the time. Do we know if the school committee has refiled a statement of interest for the South School? Yes or no?
We know they have not, and the,
Well, they're putting it together, but I think they are going to file one, yes.
Okay,
we've been asked to put it on the selectmen's agenda for the first meeting in March, I think.
they're due April 8th,
Yes.
the statement of
Yeah,
interest.
they understood. At the committee meeting that we were at prior to us making our presentation, they were talking about the SOI for South and putting it together, and I think, I want to say that Joyce's, Husseini is actually spending the time on making sure that the thing is put together the way they want to put it together, but they are definitely putting in a SOI, yes.
Thank you.
It just as a follow-up to reaffirm that this project and that project are not mutually exclusive.
Thank you.
I think that that's important. They can both move forward.
Yes, okay. Anybody else have a comment, or, yes, Janice?
Is the next meeting here, or?
I would be honest with you, I would prefer to have it at the police station, but I'll leave it up to you guys. What do you think? Anybody?
What about the library?
No. Nah,
I like the police station.
I like the police station, to be honest with you.
Continuity.
It's a nice homey place, and, you know, I feel safe there.
Joel, I want to
You
make
like
sure
the
you...
chairs. We'll have to get better chairs, Donna, but other than that,
All right, I
You-
need to-
Material that we have to look at that the public should also be seeing, because from what I'm hearing of the systems here, sorry, Donna, but this seems to be better for educating our public.
I'm also thinking SMAC doesn't have to drag equipment all over the place if they do it here at the Jones School.
I don't, we can do it however anybody wants to do it, but if, do you want to stay here? All right, I'll talk to Kelly
And we'll
and,
also, talk to Kelly, because I know we're also beginning to reserve rooms for
right,
FinCom.
the Finance Committee is going to be meeting,
Chaos, planning, planning's off week. but-
I think the Finance Committee is going to want to meet in this room, so.
Right, well, and I guess I'm just worried about more of these overlaps where they're meeting at the same time as
Yeah.
this. So it'd be nice to coordinate that, so we're not having that problem.
Yeah, but
Particularly-
you and I went to the right meeting.
Yeah.
So you got to order
Changed my
like
mind.
15 new chairs now, Joe, unfortunately.
Make it part of the appropriation. Okay. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Joel, I do have one thing.
What?
So I don't want to keep everybody here much longer, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say something. But I kind of feel like Durham Whittier's marching orders may not be 100%. And I want to make sure they're clear on kind of everything going forward. And some of that has to do with, you know, the land and moving forward towards spring town meeting. And it sounds like, and I just want to be clear, that we are moving off of spring town meeting. In talking to Durham Whittier, they are about a month and a half behind where they would have been. And that is due to looking at this land now. That's put them off schedule.
I understand that, and I think that's why we were discussing earlier, the fact that this will not be something that will probably open up at the annual town meeting in May. It's more likely to be a special town meeting because there's going to be a lot of discussion on this. And based on our experience with the high school, we want to make sure that we have a picture-perfect package that we can provide everybody to make our point. So it's my understanding, unless the town manager tells me otherwise, we're telling the architect to move forward on the Fano Drive Park Street site for a public safety building. And if something happens in the next month or two that throws that off, we'll have to address it then.
Yeah, I think at this point, we have to continue on this path, cognizant of the fact that something may fall through on it, but the reality is we have close to 50 acres of land to work with over there.
That's what we wanted to hear. It was direction on that site, that size, we can work within the cost. But we just needed to hear that because I don't think it was said.
Well, for the record, you can put that down. But I think we're all in agreement on that. Okay? Okay, we're good. Now, can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Joe. All those in favor? Aye. See you on the 19th? Is that, thank you.